Hi, listeners. In this episode of the Communicate Influence podcast, I talked to Fiona Fenwick about Prince Andrew's Newsnight interview. Fiona is a reputation management expert and has worked with brands, sports teams, organizations, and individuals to help them manage and improve their reputations. Fiona's also author of the book, Stand Out and Step Up, a Reputation Toolkit for LIfe. You can find Fiona online at 15minutes.co.nz. Let's go straight to the interview. Hi, today on the Communicate Influence podcast, we're lucky enough to have a guest, Fiona Fenwick, who is a reputation expert based in New Zealand, to explore a very current issue that lots of people are curious about, but particularly those in public relations and crisis communications. And that's the issue of Prince Andrew and his tarnished reputation. Fiona, thanks very much for joining this episode on such short notice to discuss this.
Oh, I'm absolutely delighted, Sheelagh. Thank you so much for including me. And I'll be thrilled to share some insights into this quite extraordinary situation. I'm sure, like me, Sheelagh, you look at situations like that and say, surely people in those situations who must be able to afford the best. They must be able to recruit the best. They must have the right people there. And then a situation like this occurs and you go, how on earth did that decision happen? And I wrote a blog last week on it because the thing that kept coming to my mind after hearing this whole debacle unfold was that whole Hans Christian Andersen fable, The Emperor's New Clothes. Sometimes people in certain roles just cannot get the feedback, the knowledge that they need. Now, it could be their own doing, because they may just appoint people who will just tell them what they want to hear. We all know that now through that whole sound echo piece of work that's going on, that we listen to media that we like, that agrees with us, and, we maybe recruit people who are mirrors of ourselves and tell us things and don't disagree with us. But frankly, I would want a person in the room who was going to disagree with me if required, was given permission to do that. Sure, I'd want them to do it in a respectful way. Nobody wants to be around a pain in the neck. But you need somebody who's going to challenge you. And I think with that Prince Andrew situation, I think, frankly, there wasn't enough maybe nous or challenge or connectivity to the real world for that to ever have ended well from that situation.
Now, didn't Prince Andrew's PR manager or aide or assistant or whatever they're called leave right before the interview?
Well, my understanding, Sheelagh, you could be correct, because this is fascinating in itself. We're gleaning all this information from the snippets that we're being fed, and therefore we're being manipulated into a way of thinking. What I read was that she actually left the role after the interview, and was an advocate for the interview being done. But you know what? The fact that there is no clarity around that just demonstrates again that there just isn't a clear communication flow. But my understanding from what I've read is that she was instrumental in that decision happening. But then was swiftly removed or left after the interview happened. And I think, to be honest, probably that was a right call. But I personally don't think that was the best advice to actually do the interview. And I think that's putting it mildly.
Let's dig a little bit deeper into that, Fiona. I mean, Prince Andrew's reputation was already tarnished before he gave that interview. There was his friendship with Epstein and, his reputation for partying and being a bit of a womanizer. So in terms of the interview, it was just kind of the nail in the coffin. Now, what would you have done in that situation? Would you have advised that he'd do an interview and deliver a completely different message? That's a tough situation for a PR advisor to be in. What's your take on that?
I think you're absolutely right. It is absolutely a tough position, but I think if you relish the role that you're in, those are the situations you really want to be involved with. I can look back on my career, just as a side note, and say it was those tough ones. It was those really gnarly, to the bone, critical crisis situations that were the high points of my career. So I think anyone in the PR space who really, really wants to feel they have achieved and been finger on the pulse and been at the real coalface really wants to be involved in those situations. So that's just an aside. What would I have done? I think just rolling back a little bit, one thing that's occurred to me since I wrote my blog last week was, again, we see these situations from a very luxurious point of view. We're seeing them from outside. We have limited knowledge, but we're still able to form strong opinions and views, right? And that is the way of the world. I believe Prince Andrew, over the last maybe 6 to 12 months, has been living under immense pressure. Him and his team, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, because they would have been day-to-day, 24/7 pressure around the whole aspect of the relationship with Epstein, the what may happen, what may come out in the media, and also media scrutiny. So they've been under intense pressure. Now, we don't see that when we're picking up the headlines or on our phones and seeing stuff. We're just seeing the story as it's unfolding. So one thing in terms of mitigation, looking at the situation, it may be they felt there was just nowhere else to go because they were under such intense scrutiny that they felt, frankly, we're getting so this is so intense and we're under such constant barrage from the media. We need to do something. And therefore, that might have pushed them over the edge of doing the interview, right? So us looking as professionals looking in going, that's just crazy. It's very easy to do that, as I say, when you haven't had that kind of pressure on you. However, that's a slight mitigation. It certainly isn't a mitigating factor. It's just a slight thing I've thought about over the last few days when I'm being compassionate. Looking at it, when you sit down with someone who is in a situation or an organisation that's in a situation that something has gone wrong, the wheel has come off, something is either they've transgressed, something is illegal, or there's brand impact, reputation, there's a problem, you sit down with the person who basically makes the decisions. And I'm talking at the highest level. You don't sit down talking to, a person who knows them or a person who's going to speak on their behalf. You sit down and you talk to that person and you discuss it and you get honesty. Now, for me, a big flag is if you don't get to sit down with that person who is basically the key decision maker or the team of key decision makers. If you're not getting into that space, then I wouldn't touch it, because you're never going to know if you're getting the true story. I need to see the colour of the eyes of the person who is in that situation, to hear them. And if I feel, even if they have done something that is wrong, if you hear them and you feel that they want to go a certain way, either by apology or by making it right or doing something to help the situation, then you need to know as an advisor that there is a trust there and there's an honesty there. If there's a trust and an honesty, you can start working a way through any situation. And I've worked with some, Sheelagh, that have been pretty bad. But at the end of the day, the reputation of the individual or organisation has actually been stronger and more positive than it was before the situation started. Now, that's kind of hard to believe, but I'm sure we can all think of situations in our own, either our own personal situations or from our, impact, things impacting on the global stage, of people who maybe have done something wrong but have handled it well, and therefore they have actually enhanced their position or their brand or whatever afterwards. Now, pulling it back to Prince Andrew, as you asked, if I had sat down, and I've thought about this, if I'd sat down and been the person that had been asked to see what could be done to manage this situation, it would be down to absolute honesty. And that is, what are we dealing with here? What are the key issues that are being asked about? And if there was an honest answer to those, then there is a way of communicating that. So during that interview, and everybody talks about it being, a forensic and hard-hitting and deep interview. I've got the greatest respect for the interviewer, but I actually don't think it was that hard-hitting, to be honest. I think it was a platform for him to choose how he was going to manage this. Now, to be honest, Sheelagh, I would have thought a situation where he expressed deepest remorse for his ill judgment about the relationship with Epstein, especially after the facts came to life. His lack of character judgment before that, well, we can all say we meet people and we're not sometimes the best to character judge. But after it was made very clear to him what that person was involved with, then, to apologise for still being involved, having known those behaviours. Empathising with the victims, which is absolutely up there as the top thing that anyone should do. Apologising to your customers, your family, your clients, that's absolutely up there, but it's got to be authentic. It's not just the words, right? So by doing that, and then by saying, I will do anything I can to share knowledge about anything that will help the investigating authorities bring justice and bring closure, if possible, to the people affected. Now, if he was able to say all of those things, I think interviewing would have been a great thing. If he was not...
But how...
Sorry, go.
Just quickly to interject. I'm just wondering how much being a part of the royal family is responsible for that, because it's not the first time that we've seen a lack of empathy from the royal family. You go back to Diana's death in 1997, and the Queen was criticised. Now, whether that was, well deserved, or she was taking care of her grandsons in Scotland, we're not sure. But the point is that people want leadership and empathy from her, and often it doesn't seem to happen.
I agree.
Is there a sense of entitlement with members of the royal family where they just can't grasp the need for empathy?
Yep. You've hit it on the head. Absolutely. A lack of empathy. And I think it's on public record, I think generally for everyone, that the Queen absolutely got that wrong. But the piece that was put in place was for the royal family to become more connected, to become more empathetic with the people who they, let's face it, still rule. So that was a piece that was put in place, and that's what makes this absolutely incredulous. That yes, we know there's a pervasive sense of entitlement, and I think that is probably unlikely to ever disappear, even in the younger generation. How can you not have a sense of entitlement when you are entitled? How is that ever going to happen? But what you can do is you can put conduits in place that keep you connected with the outside world. Those are, as I've referred to before, those voices in the room, those people who will challenge, those people who respectfully will share with you what the pulse is of the nation and the international climate. Now, I think some of the royals have been quite smart at doing that. But my worry is that there are so many facets to the royal family that people like Andrew, for example, who normally can just get on and live his life in a, as you say, still in a very entitled way. When it comes down to it, if you're not having that conduit with the outside world and you're not getting those reality checks, things like this will happen. And this has been a perfect example that it will continue to happen unless they put measures in place to have people like you and me, Sheelagh, who could actually go and sit and have a sensible question and answer session and put that sense of realism where it actually doesn't exist at this moment in time.